This is Newshour, live from the BBC with me, Tim Franks. One final voice to bring you today on the strong signals that Israel is sending out that it's preparing for a ground invasion of southern Lebanon in an effort, it says, to stop Hezbollah firing rockets into northern Israel. If it does come to an Israeli ground incursion, as the chief of the IDF has now strongly hinted, here's someone who knows what that might mean, at least from the Israeli side. Asael Lubotzky is a doctor, a molecular biologist, an author, and a combat veteran from the Second Lebanon War, as it was called, the 34-day war of 2006.
So I served as a young officer in the IDF, and during the Second Lebanon War in 2006, while fighting in southern Lebanon, during a battle I was hit by an advanced anti-tank missile. The missile hit my armored vehicle, which I was commanding. Two of my men were injured, and I was severely injured. I was in critical condition, and my friends managed to evacuate me out of the burning vehicle, and they put me on a stretcher, ran downhill from this area. During the evacuation, I thought I'm losing my leg. I saw my leg almost falling apart from the stretcher, and they managed to evacuate me from this battlefield where my men were fighting to the border, where a helicopter took me out of this area directly to the hospital. I was in a severe condition, requiring 9 blood units, and I spent for a few days in the ICU. And then for over a year, I went through a rehabilitation process, going through 15 surgeries and many medical treatments until I was able to walk again with crutches. But that was my journey to come back to life.
Asael, I mean, it's a story of you sustaining very serious injury, and I wonder what it makes you think tonight. I mean, as we hear the words of Herzi Halevi, the chief of the Israel Defense Forces, saying to troops, prepare to go over the border once again, prepare to fight Hezbollah on their territory. What does that make you think?
So I will tell you that the memories are difficult. I mean, losing friends and sustaining my own injuries are things that I will never forget. As I told you, I was severely injured, and I have memories that will stay with me for life, both physically and emotionally. I have those thoughts. But at the same time, I do know that the reason that the IDF now prepares an invasion is not because we or anyone in Israel seek war. To the contrary, I think people are trying to avoid war as they can. But I think it comes from empathy. It comes from people in our country that think about the northern residents who have like a threat any day that could be they have a fear of rockets raining down, or Radwan terrorists invading homes. So the reason is not because anyone seeks war, but we want to avoid war, but we also want to avoid casualties on our end. So it is like a hard memories, but I think I feel from my friends who also are called even tonight to the northern border that people do it not because they want to do it, because there's no other chance. And I hope there's going to be a way to avoid it.
I guess, I mean, there are two questions that arise out of that. One is, whether it is the right thing to do, whether it is the only response. But the other question, which I want to come to first, though, is just, there are some voices, maybe they're in a minority in Israel, but who advocate strongly that Israel should have as much security as possible. And yes, people in the north of the country should be able to return home. But Israel's experience of fighting in southern Lebanon is a very hard one. And Hezbollah is a very well-armed, battle-hardened, dug-in force. And that it is a massive risk, perhaps too great a risk, for Israel to go in. Indeed, some are saying it's a trap that Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah, is laying for Israel.
So I would say that the 2006 war taught me firsthand how complex war is, and specifically how complex modern warfare can be, especially when you fight in like in densely populated areas and where people can hide among civilians and store rockets among civilians. We know how complex it is. I'm not an expert like in the military process today. What is the right choice from a military perspective? I leave this to the generals, chief of staff, Halevi. I do know that when people consider war, both in the army and in the general population, people know how complex and scary it is, and there are so many wounded soldiers and so many people who were injured and killed by terror attacks in the past year and in general in Israel. So we know that the war is like the one of the worst case scenarios. So I really believe that although we strive for peace, when war comes, it's only as a necessity, not because anyone strives for a war. If it's a trap or not, it's hard to say. I hope that the IDF, as our military, as the army, knows the way how to challenge Hezbollah and try to push them back in order to avoid events like October 7 happening in the north. This is like the biggest fear of people in Israel.
I mean, the other argument, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is that at best, even if somehow this were to work, somehow a decisive victory was scored over Hezbollah, it only buys a bit of time, and it will sow such devastation on the people of Lebanon. Inevitably, there will be a large number of people who are not connected with Hezbollah, who are hurt or killed, and it just further poisons the soil. That's one of the arguments that is often made about these types of operations.
It is a major argument, and I think it is important to point out that the fight, or our fight, is not against Lebanese people. It's against terrorist
inevitably, I mean, they will end up suffering.
Yeah, and war inevitably has people suffer from both sides when there is war. But I also understand how is it to grow up with like a fear on a daily basis that a rocket will come or a terrorist will enter your house. So you have to manage and balance those threats. Is there like a great solution? Probably not. We have to take the right choices, but we are choosing between like maybe bad and worse. There's no like a very a good solution for these conflicts, unfortunately.
Asael Lubotzky, now a doctor, then back in 2006, a combat veteran from the Second Lebanon War. From all of us on NewsHour, thanks for listening.